Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Ring of Destiny. Chapter 166. Brother David, is it because of this woman that you didn't eat with me? Wang Hanan muttered to himself, his eyes were already wet. Sui family villa. Ruben and Gu Wenchen are sitting in the living room drinking tea and chatting. In the past, although Ruben was the richest man in Horrendal, he would not have had the opportunity to drink tea and chat with Gu Wenchen. Now Ruben's identity is different. Everyone has recognized that Ruben is David's father-in-law. This identity is much more powerful than the title of the richest man in Horrendal. Soon, Sonia followed David there. After seeing David, Gu Wenchen hurriedly got up. Mr. Chen, you don't have to be so polite in ancient times, you seem to be very tough during this time. David smiled slightly. It's not thanks to Mr. Chen, or else my old bones would have been sucked up by the resentful dragon long ago. Gu Wenchen knew that his body was so good thanks to David. If it wasn't for David's action, Gu Wenchen would have been sitting on the dragon chair all day long, and his body would have collapsed long ago. It's still my old physique, David laughed. David, I heard Sonia say that you are going to work in Zinurihua now. Ruben asked David. Well, I became a salesperson. David nodded. Why are you struggling? When I asked you if you liked doing business, you said whether you liked it or not. Now you're going to be a small salesperson. You don't want to start from the bottom, right? Ruben asked. David shook his head. He didn't know how to explain it. When he went to the interview, he didn't know that the company belonged to the Sui family. Moreover, he didn't plan to work all the time, just to stabilize his parents temporarily. Seeing that David did not speak, Ruben continued, I have already notified someone to do it. When I go to work on Monday, I will directly give you Sonia's chairmanship. Anyway, Sonia will not go to the company for a month or two. I expect seeing June to manage it alone, and I don't worry about it. When David heard this, he was immediately confused, and waved his hands again and again. President Su, I don't want to do it, I really don't have time to manage the company, being this salesman is just to stabilize my parents, I have more important things to do. Do it. David didn't want to be entangled by mundane things, he had to hurry up to cultivate, or he wouldn't be able to land on the nameless island on July 15th. Don't hold back, this matter is settled like this, it's not that you work in the company every day, you can just do your own business. Ruben thought that David was embarrassed and politely declined, so he let David take over. Seeing this, David couldn't say anything. The food is ready, and a few people eat and chat. Ancient, are you looking for me because of the spirit pen? David agreed to come over for dinner because Sonia said that Gu Wenchen had something to do with him. Gu Wenchen said with an embarrassed expression, Mr. Chen, I've already spoken to Dea. Is true, he's already on his way back, and it shouldn't take a few days. Yu Lao Gu has been bothered. David is now very eager to heal his mother's eyes. It's nothing, I have something I would like to ask Mr. Chen to help with, Gu Wenchen said. Ancient, feel free to say anything, as long as I can do it, I will never refuse, David nodded. Mr. Chen, I know that you have unpredictable power. I have an old friend who took his wife to sweep the tomb once, and his wife started to go crazy. There was no way to seek doctors and medicines everywhere. I think Mr. Chen may be healed. Ever since Gu Wenchen saw David forcing out the resentful dragon on the dragon chair, he has already fallen in love with David. After I went to the cemetery, I was crazy when I came back. Most of them were haunted by ghosts. There is no big problem, David said lightly. If Mr. Chen can be cured, I will tell this old friend of mine now and ask him to bring his wife to see Mr. Chen. Gu Wenchen happily took out his mobile phone and prepared to make a call. David waved his hand and stopped Gu Wenchen. Guo is not in a hurry, this kind of thing is best seen at night. Gu told me the address. After get off work, I can go there in person. That's really bothering Mr. Chen. Gu repeatedly thanked him. It's just a little effort, I beg the ancients to find the spirit pen, it's not the same as bothering you, David said with a smile. Helping each other, don't be polite to each other, the dishes will be cold for a while. Reuben opened his mouth, otherwise he didn't know when the two of them would be polite. After the meal, David was sent back to the company by Sonia. David, I'll pick you up at night and go see with you. I've never encountered a ghost possessed before. Sonia followed David excitedly. Aren't you afraid? David asked with a little playfulness when he saw Sonia's excited look. What are you afraid of, aren't you here? I know that you are highly skilled in medicine, and you can attract ghosts and souls. Some children are scared to cry at night, and some doctors are fine with a few spells, no injections and no medicine. Sonia said indifferently. David smiled and didn't say anything, he knew that when Sonia really saw it, he might be scared to death. David got out of the car, Sonia drove straight away, and upstairs, Wang Hanin was still standing by the window, she had been waiting for David to come back, she wanted to see who this girl was. It's just that this time she didn't see it clearly, only saw David walking down from the car with a smile on his face. When David returned to the sales department, he saw that Wang Hanin was in a wrong mood, so he asked, Hanin, what's the matter with you? It's okay. Wang Hanin didn't look at David, but just tried his best to squeeze out a smile and left. David didn't care too much. He just sat down at his workstation to work. In the afternoon, the SUA Group head office issued a document, which was placed directly on the desk of General Manager Xing Jun. Looking at the contents of the document, Xing Jun's face became extremely ugly and hideous. The content of the document is personnel adjustment. David will be the chairman of Xinyu, which will officially take effect next Monday. In this way, David became Xing Jun's immediate boss. Why? Xing Jun looked at the contents of the document, roared loudly, and ripped the document to shreds. Mr. Xing, what's wrong? The secretary heard the movement and hurried in. Get out of here, Xing Jun yelled at the secretary and directly scolded the secretary and ran away. At this moment, Xing Jun, the whole person seems to be in madness, his eyes are a little scarlet. David, it's all because of you, it's all because of you, I'm going to kill you, Xing Jun gritted his teeth. He was a top student who had been in the SUA family for so many years, but he was actually defeated by a reform-through labor prisoner. Xing Jun is not convinced, at this moment his heart has become extremely distorted. After a long time, Xing Jun's mood slowly calmed down. Looking at the documents that he had torn to shreds, he slowly opened his drawer. At this moment, in Xing Jun's drawer, a pistol was placed in it. Looking at the pistol in front of him, Xing Jun seems to be making a difficult decision. Slowly picking up the gun, Xing Jun stroked the cold body of the gun, and he had already made a decision in his heart. Kui Zaiwan, let David come to my office. Xing Jun picked up the internal phone and called Kui Zaiwan. Kui Zaiwan, who was originally angry in the office, was surprised when he received a call from Xing Jun. Zaiwan, what is President Xing doing with David? Sun Xiaomeng asked. How would I know? Kui Zaiwan frowned, he always felt something was wrong. Isn't President Xing giving all the commission to David? I have long seen that David has a relationship with President Singh. Otherwise, how could such a good thing be handed over to David? Sun Xiaomeng said with a look of anger, very dissatisfied. Okay, stop nagging, I'm annoying now. Kui Ziwen glared at Sun Xiaomeng, then walked out of the office, came to David's workstation and said, David, President Singh asked you to come to his office, probably because of the contract. What should you say after you go there? You should know it yourself. If it wasn't for Xiaomeng and I to have a good relationship before, would you be able to sign the contract so easily? David glanced at Kui Ziwen, the corners of his mouth raised slightly, and he let out a sneer. He didn't say anything, just got up and left. Seeing David like that, Kui Ziwen was furious. What, could you stay in this company if Xiaomeng didn't introduce you to come in? Dare to fight against me, I will make you regret it sooner or later. Seeing Jun's office, after David arrived, the secretary wanted to report, but David pushed the door and walked in, and the secretary couldn't stop it. Mr. Singh, he forced his way in. The secretary was so frightened that she hurriedly explained to Singh Jun. Singh Jun looked at David and waved his hand towards the secretary. Go out, no one is allowed to come in without me. Seeing this, the secretary nodded and went out, and closed the door. Sit down, Singh Jun pointed to the chair in front of him. David was not polite and sat directly opposite Singh Jun. The two looked at each other like this for a full minute, and no one said a word. If you have anything to do with me, just tell me quickly, I'm busy. David saw that Singh Jun had been silent, so he said. David, I have checked your background, you are an ordinary person, and you have been in prison. How can you get Sonia's love? Why can you be the chairman of the company? Why? Singh Jun stared at David, he just couldn't understand. He is a top student studying abroad, why Sonia doesn't like herself, but likes David? If David was a rich son, or a second-generation official, Singh Jun would feel better, but David is an ordinary person who has been in prison. Even so, Sonia would rather like David. I don't like myself either, which makes Singh Jun really can't understand. No, why do you like someone so much? Sonia just likes me, what can you do? The corners of David's mouth raised slightly, and he said playfully. David's expression and tone suddenly stimulated Singh Jun. Singh Jun, who had tried to calm down originally, exploded in an instant. David, I want you to get out of Horindal immediately, leave Sonia, and don't come back from now on, or I will definitely make you regret it. Singh Jun was trembling slightly, his eyes were wide open, and he yelled at David forcefully. Regret? David sneered, I have never regretted it, and you are not qualified to order me, let alone threaten me. You want you to see if I am qualified to order you, Singh Jun said, suddenly took out the pistol in the drawer and aimed directly at David. This is the first time that Singh Jun has pointed a gun at a person, and his hands are shaking so much. Seeing that Singh Jun actually took out a gun and aimed it at him, the sneer on David's face became even more obvious. Seeing that David was not afraid at all, Singh Jun roared, I can really shoot, as long as I pull the trigger, you will immediately splatter blood on the spot, then why don't you shoot? I see that your hands are shaking so badly, I'm afraid you can't shoot right? I'll get closer, so you can aim. David actually moved his body towards Singh Jun, so that the gun in Singh Jun's hand was closer to the nearest. Seeing David's reaction, Singh Jun's face flushed with anger. David, I can really shoot, you get out of Horindal now, I can spare your life, or I will kill you. Singh Jun's entire face was flushed. He had never killed anyone, let alone killed anyone with a gun. This gun was assembled from spare parts he bought himself. When he was abroad, he liked firearms. Very strict, Sing Jun secretly assembled one. Although he likes to play with guns, he has never hit anyone with a gun, let alone killed anyone. Now Sing Jun is trying his best to control himself, but his hands are still trembling. Looking at Sing Jun's face, David's face was full of sneers. Just like you, I'm afraid you don't even dare to kill a chicken, right? You dare to kill. Don't force me, I will really shoot. Sing Jun was sweating profusely at the moment. Although he had already made a decision, Sing Jun was still nervous at the last moment. Now you put down the gun, I may still save your life. If you shoot, the person who died will definitely be yours. David's face turned gloomy. What are you talking about? I'll shoot you to death now, and then go abroad directly. Who can do what to me? Sing Jun didn't believe what David said. Now that the gun is in his hands, he has absolute initiative. If you don't believe it, then shoot, shoot. David suddenly raised his voice, directly startling that Sing Jun. But because of this fright, the gun in Sing Jun's hand also pulled the trigger directly. Boom! After a gunshot, I saw a spark burst out from the muzzle, and the bullet flew out of the gun chamber in a spinning. This time, Sing Jun was taken aback. He was not mentally prepared at all. This was a nervous pull of the trigger. David's hand grasped in the void, and the bullet was directly caught in his hand. At this moment, David's hand was wrapped in spiritual power, and the bullet couldn't hurt at all. Slowly open his hand, and the bullet of yellow-orange is exposed. Receiving bullets empty-handed? This time, Sing Jun was stupid, and the pistol in his hand fell directly to the ground. I said, as long as you shoot, you will surely die. After David finished speaking, his body exuded a terrifying murderous aura. The murderous aura directly enveloped Sing Jun. Feeling the murderous aura on David, Sing Jun's scalp was numb, as if he had fallen into the abyss. No, no, it's impossible, impossible, how could you possibly catch a bullet? Sing Jun's face was full of horror, and he shook his head desperately. He couldn't believe that everything in front of him was real, he couldn't understand it, it was beyond his cognition range. Sing Jun is just an ordinary person, not even a martial artist, so he doesn't know the magical powers of martial arts at all. Nothing is impossible. If you don't believe it, you can shoot a shot. David's eyes narrowed slightly, and the cold light in his eyes made Sing Jun fall directly from the chair to the ground. Sing Jun didn't dare to shoot, he didn't even have the courage to pick it up. Receiving bullets empty-handed? Although Sing Jun couldn't believe it, this was the fact in front of him, and he couldn't bear to believe it. At this moment, Sing Jun seems to want to understand why David, a seemingly ordinary guy who has been in prison, can be liked by Sonia. Can a person who can catch a bullet with his bare hands be an ordinary person? Sing Jun knew that David must have another identity that he couldn't find out at all. Sing Jun also remembered the scene in Zaixian and Zhuang. Liao Fixiang did not treat David, but scolded himself. Now it seems that this Liao Fixiang is also afraid of David's identity. It turned out that he was not from the same world with David at all. Sing Jun had always been proud of himself as a returnee, thinking that he was 100 times stronger than David, but at this moment he suddenly realized that he was still superficial. Please, please don't kill me. Sing Jun was cowardly, afraid. He was afraid of death, and he dared to kill. He just pulled the trigger under tension. Even though he had already prepared for it, Sing Jun still did not dare to pull the trigger to kill when he really faced it. Looking at Sing Jun like that, David also lost interest in killing him, and threw the bullet to the ground, and said coldly, "Starting today, Get out of Horrendal, don't let me see you." After David finished speaking, he turned around and walked out of the office. When the office door opened, the secretary was at the door. When she saw Seeing June kneeling on the ground through the crack of the opened door, she was stunned. David glanced at the secretary and was startled, but David didn't say anything or closed the door, so he let the secretary look at Seeing June, who was kneeling on the ground. Go away, Seeing June roared at the secretary. The secretary was so frightened that he ran away in a hurry, and he was also in a panic, for fear that he would be expelled because he saw Seeing June's ugliness. The secretary didn't know yet, but at this moment, Seeing June slowly picked up the gun and bullets, glanced at his office, and left. Since then, Seeing June has never appeared in the company, nor in Horrendal. David, did Mr. Seeing ask you to tell you about the commission? How did you follow Mr. Seeing? Seeing David returning to the sales department, Kui Ziwen hurriedly asked David. Although he didn't like to talk to David very much, Kui Ziwen still found David for the commission. Nothing. David glanced at Kui Ziwen and said coldly. David, I think you just want to take the commission all by yourself, right? I can tell you that the company stipulates that any contract signed by anyone in the sales department has a part of the commission for the manager, not to mention that Tianmei company has been running for several months. It's just a contract for nothing. Don't think that you are amazing. If it wasn't for my introduction, would you be able to join the company? Seeing David like that, Sun Xiaomeng said angrily. I don't care about that commission. If there is, I don't want any. David glanced at that Sun Xiaomeng, and then said lightly. David, this is what you said, everyone has heard it, you don't want it at all, don't regret it. When Kui Ziwen heard this, he hurriedly said loudly, for fear that David would regret it. I won't regret it. David smiled coldly. Kui Ziwen is happy now. If David doesn't want the commission, then it's all his. When it comes time to buy a suite in Pine Bay, it should be no problem to pay a down payment. Everyone else in the sales department looked at David in shock, and they all laughed at David's stupidity. There must be a lot of commission for such a big contract. Han-in, you are in the same group with David. David's commission is no longer needed. You must do it. Don't be as stupid as him. Wang Lanlin came to Wang Han-in's side and whispered. Wang Han-in glanced at David not far away, then shook his head and said, I don't want it either. This contract was not signed by himself, and Wang Han-in didn't want any commission. As for why David didn't want a commission, Wang Han-in didn't want to ask. Maybe it was because he had found a rich woman's girlfriend, so he didn't like this money. Both of them are sick, they have a grudge with money. Wang Lanlin pouted and left. When he got off work in the afternoon, Wang Han-in didn't take David's car to go home, but took a taxi and left. This girl, what happened today? David muttered in a low voice. He felt that Wang Han-in had no energy all afternoon, and did not speak to himself. After returning home, David simply changed his clothes, and Sonia drove the car to pick him up. In this dilapidated community, there was a luxury car parked at the door, which instantly attracted the attention of many people. Whose rich lady is this? Why are you driving to our broken community? Wouldn't it be because of the young man in the community? People have money at a glance. How can they look at the boys in our community? At the gate of the community, there was a group of old ladies sitting, chatting about nothing. Wang Chongfeng was among them, and she was very curious as to who the car was coming to pick up. But when she saw that David actually came out of the community and got into the car, she was stunned. Chongfeng, isn't that young man David from Baokuo? He found a rich woman and girlfriend. I remember that David has a good relationship with your Han-in. What's going on? Young people today are all greedy for vanity, several old ladies were nagging, and Wang Chongfeng was in a hurry to go home. She wanted to ask her daughter, what the H3LL was going on. David got into Sonia's car and went all the way to a suburb of Horindal according to the address given by Gu Wenchen. This place has not yet been developed, there are low-rise bungalows everywhere, and the roads are not very good. After more than an hour, David arrived at the place, and at this time Gu Wenchen was already waiting. David looked at this place and couldn't believe Gu Wenchen's identity, that there were still friends in such a place. Mr. Chen, seeing David arriving, Gu Wenchen greeted him very politely. And beside Gu Wenchen, there is also an old man with white temples, but this old man's aura and clothes are very different from Gu Wenchen. Old Song, this is the Mr. Chen I told you. He is very skilled in medicine, Gu Wenchen said to the old man beside him. When Lao Song saw David, he was stunned for a moment, and his face was full of incredible expressions. In his impression, the person who was honored by Gu Wenchen as a gentleman, and who has excellent medical skills, must be an old professor, an old expert, etc., but he did not expect David to be so young, speaking of a child. Lao Song, Gu Wenchen shouted 2 more times to the dazed Lao Song. Oh, Lao Song reacted, and hurriedly stretched out his dry and wrinkled hands, and said to David, "Hello, Mr. Chen." David shook hands with Lao Song, nodded slightly, and said hello. "Mr. Chen, Lao Song's daughter-in-law is in the house, can you help me take a look?" Gu Wenchen said, "Let Lao Song lead the way." And Gu Wenchen followed David side by side, and at the same time explained his relationship with Lao Song. It turns out that Gu Wenchen followed Lao Song to a young age. When Gu Wenchen was a child, he also lived in this low-rise bungalow. It has been several decades. Later, Gu Wenchen went to school and walked out of here, and slowly he entered the political world again, and there were not many contacts with some old friends from the past. After Gu Wenchen retired, he returned to Horindal and got in touch with his former friends. Gu Wenchen once wanted to help Lao Song get out of here and buy a house in the city, but Lao Song was reluctant to leave here. Asking the gods is over. The two often drank tea and chatted together. Although Lao Song lived a poorer life, he lived a fulfilling life. He never asked Gu Wenchen, but just a few days ago, Lao Song found Gu Wenchen and wanted Gu Wenchen to give it to him. Find a famous doctor to treat your wife. After all, Gu Wenchen has a wide network of contacts and a great face, so it is not difficult to find a doctor with excellent medical skills, but after Gu Wenchen heard about Lao Song's wife's condition, he immediately guessed that Lao Song's wife should not be as simple as getting sick. So I found David. Soon, under the guidance of Lao Song, David and the others arrived at a small courtyard. The courtyard was very small, with only 3 brick and tile houses. There were chickens and ducks in the corner of the courtyard. There was an unpleasant smell in the air. Odor. As soon as she entered the yard, Sonia frowned slightly and covered her nose and mouth. Sonia, who seldom comes to this kind of place, can't stand the smell, but David didn't feel anything. After all, he also lived in the countryside for 10 years. A few years later, I followed my mother to the city. As soon as David and the others entered the room, they heard a woman crying in the room on the left. The voice was shrill, especially scary. "Ah! I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. I'm the Queen Mother now, and I'm going to sentence you to death." The woman's voice was crying and making trouble, making Sonia pale with fright, and clutching David's sleeve tightly with one hand, she regretted coming with her. Lao Song opened the door on the left and saw an old woman in her 60s, already full of white hair and a wrinkled face, who was screaming madly. There was only one bed in the room and nothing else, and the old woman jumped onto the bed immediately after seeing someone come in. "Who are you? Dare to break into my palace, I will arrest you," the old woman roared with wide eyes. "Wife, I'm looking for someone to come over to see your doctor, don't make trouble anymore," the husband used to comfort his wife. But who knew that the old woman stepped forward and bit Lao Song fiercely, and then ran to the corner. "Hey!" Seeing this, Lao Song sighed helplessly. "How long has your wife been like this? Has she been crazy all the time?" David asked Lao Song. "It's been 7 or 8 days, it's not always like this, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but now the good times are getting less and less," Lao Song said with a sad face. "I heard Gu Gu said that you came back after going to the cemetery, and your wife is like this?" David continued to ask. Lao Song nodded. "Yes, my wife always said she missed her son a few days ago, so I took her to the cemetery to have a look, but who knew it would be like this at night, Mr. Chen, Lao Song's son died a few years ago because of an accident," Gu hurriedly explained to David. David looked at Lao Song and his wife, and there was a burst of pity in his heart. Losing a child at an old age is the saddest thing. "Did anything strange happen after you went to the cemetery?" David asked. Lao Song thought for a while, then shook his head. "No, everything is quite normal, nothing happened, Mr. Chen. Could Lao Song's wife be a ghost?" Gu Gu asked in a low voice. "I'll take a look at it first." After David finished speaking, he took out a cloth bag with rows of silver needles inside. Soon, David took out a silver needle and walked towards the old woman in the corner. Seeing this, Lao Song hurriedly stood in front of David. "You have to be careful, don't let my wife hurt you, she no longer recognizes people, don't worry, nothing will happen." David smiled slightly. When David was in front of the old woman suddenly rushed towards David and was about to bite. The silver needle in David's hand stabbed into the old woman's neck, and the old woman was stunned, and then lay down on the bed with a thud. Seeing this, Lao Song hurried up and shook his wife vigorously. Seeing that his wife was motionless, Lao Song became anxious in an instant, and immediately shouted at David, "What did you do to my wife? Is she dead?" Lao Song was very excited, and it seemed that he was going to do something to David. Seeing this, Gu Wenchen hurriedly stepped forward to stop Lao Song. "Lao Song, Mr. Chen is treating your wife, what are you doing? Don't worry, your wife just passed out and will be fine." After David finished speaking, he sat directly on the bed and put one hand on the old woman's pulse, and then a pure spiritual power was transmitted from David's body to the old woman's body. If the old woman is a ghost, David's spiritual power will definitely be able to force the ghost out, but unfortunately, no matter how David increases the transmission of spiritual power, the old woman is motionless and has no reaction at all. David frowned slightly. Could it be that I made a mistake? At first, David also thought that the old woman was a ghost, and he only needed to force the ghost out, and then absorb and refine it by himself, but now the old woman doesn't seem to be a ghost. "Mr. Chen." Gu Wenchen saw that there was no movement for a long time, and David's expression was a little wrong, so he called out softly. At this time, Sonia also bravely stood behind David. Although she was afraid, she was still curious to see what the ghost looked like. But for a long time, there was no movement at all, and the atmosphere in the whole room became a little embarrassing. David slowly retracted his hand, and there were faint sweat stains on his forehead. He just used too much spiritual power, making him feel a little tired. "She's not hysterical, I'm checking the others." After David finished speaking, he picked up the silver needle and gently stabbed it in the old woman's wrist, and then slowly twisted it. Soon, almost all the silver needles pierced into the old woman's wrist. After a while, David took out the silver needle, and at this time, a drop of black blood came out from the old woman's wrist. Seeing the black blood coming out of the old woman, everyone was shocked, especially the old song, who was nervous and wanted to speak, but was afraid of disturbing David. "Mr. Chen, what's going on?" Gu Wenchen was also a little confused. How could a normal person have black blood? This is a symptom of poisoning. It seems that the neurological disorder caused by poisoning, so it is crazy, David explained. Poisoning. Gu Gu was stunned for a moment, then looked at Lao Song and said, "Lao Song, what did your wife eat before she got sick? How could she be poisoned?" Lao Song frowned and thought about it carefully, then shook his head, "I didn't eat anything. When I came back from the cemetery, I just ate a simple meal, and I also ate the meal. Why didn't I get poisoned?" This time, Gu Wenchen didn't know how to explain it, so he could only look at David. "Remember, after your wife went to the cemetery, did she eat or drink anything, including wild fruits and weeds, or did she touch anything?" David asked Lao Song solemnly. No, I didn't touch anything, it's just that when Lao Song answered, his eyes were dodging, and he didn't dare to look directly at David. Seeing Lao Song like that, David knew that he must be lying. Since the other party is unwilling to tell the truth, even if David takes pity on them, there is no way to heal them. Since that's the case, you should invite Gao Ming. I can't see this disease. David packed up the silver needles and prepared to leave. This time, Lao Song was a little panicked, and Gu Wenchen also saw that Lao Song seemed to be hiding something, so he roared at Lao Song, "Lao Song, I asked Mr. Chen to treat your wife, but you still, to be honest, are you planning to let your wife die?" Lao Song looked embarrassed, looked at his wife on the bed, and finally gritted his teeth, "We did see something in the cemetery, and then my wife picked it up at home." "What?" Gu Wenchen and David asked in unison. "It's a Ganodermalocytum, it looks very big, like a wild Ganodermalocytum, but it's a little different from other Ganodermalocytum. My wife thinks this thing must be very valuable, so she brought it back." Lao Song said with an embarrassed look on his face. "Where's the thing?" "Show it to me," David said. Lao Song nodded, walked out of the room, and soon came with a large glass bottle in his hand. In the glass bottle, there is indeed something that is exhausted from Ganodermalocytum, but this Ganodermalocytum does not look like a plant. "What kind of lingzi is this? It's clearly a pile of rotten meat." After Sonia saw the contents of the glass bottle, she almost spit it out. "This is not rotten meat, it is indeed a plant, growing on the ground, but it looks like meat products." With that said, Lao Song opened the glass bottle and took out the thing. "Old Song, be careful of poison," Gu Wenchen hurriedly shouted when he saw that Lao Song was actually going to take out something with his hands. "It's okay, I've already taken it. If it's poisonous, it'll be poisoned long ago." Lao Song didn't take it seriously, and directly took out the thing similar to Ganodermalocytum. "In that case, it's impossible for your wife to be poisoned with this kind of thing." Gu Wenchen analyzed it. Since Lao Song is fine with it, his wife can't be poisoned even if he touches it. "It's fine to touch it, but it will be poisoned if you bite it," David said, took something similar to Ganodermalocytum in Lao Song's hand, turned it over gently, and saw that at the bottom, there was a small gap on the thing. Obviously it was bitten by someone. When Lao Song saw the gap, he was immediately surprised. "I told her long ago that this unknown thing cannot be eaten easily, but I didn't expect that she would secretly take a bite. Let her go. Lao Song regretted it and kept beating himself. Old Song, don't blame yourself, Mr. Chen will have a solution. Gu Wenchen stopped Lao Song, then looked at David and said, Mr. Chen, what is this thing? It doesn't look like Ganodermalocidum. David reached out and took the Lingzi-like thing in Lao Song's hand and squeezed it gently. The Lingzi-like thing seemed to move a little, as if he felt something. This is called Aconita meat Ganoderma, also known as Ganodermalocidum. This kind of thing will grow in places where the feng shui is strong and the turbidity is out of balance. Although this is also a plant, it has eyes like animals and can feel it. To everything in the outside world, this meat Ganodermalocidum is called Tai Sui at one eye, and green at the second eye. As long as it grows to have all the five senses, it will become Aconita meat Ganoderma. This kind of thing is very rare. Picked by humans, or eaten by other animals, very few can grow into shape. This thing is extremely poisonous, and it all uses underground carrion as nutrients, so it has a high chance of growing in the cemetery. Fortunately, I only took a small bite, otherwise even if the Deluo immortal descended to the world, it would not be able to save it. Don't look at this. There are few things, and there is no medicinal value. If you soak in medicinal wine, I am afraid that you will die, David explained carefully. After listening to David's words, the old song trembled with fright. Fortunately, because his wife was ill, he didn't have time to make the medicinal wine, otherwise he would be finished. Mr. Chen, does that mean Lao Song's wife can be saved? Gu Wenchen asked in a low voice. Help me. David nodded, returned the meat Ganoderma to Lao Song, then took out the silver needle, and began to quickly tie it on Lao Song's wife. After a while, Lao Song's wife woke up, and then a mouthful of black blood spit out from her mouth. David waved his hand, took back the silver needle factor, and put it back in the cloth bag. Okay, just keep it quiet for a few days and you'll be fine, David said to Lao Song. Wife, wife, Lao Song hurriedly shouted to his wife. The old woman slowly opened her eyes, and after seeing several people in the room, she said with a confused expression, Old Song, why are there so many people in the family? Oh, it's all right, I'm here to see you. You're all right now, rest well. Seeing that his wife is really fine, Lao Song said happily. David and the others walked out of the room and into the courtyard. After Lao Song came out, he knelt down directly to David. David was stunned for a moment, and he hurriedly put one hand up to hold Lao Song up, but did not let him kneel. Benefactor, thank you for your kindness, our family has no money, and we don't know how to repay the benefactor, Lao Song kept following David to thank him. From the questioning from the beginning, Lao Song is now grateful to David. Old Song, Mr. Chen is not here for money, so you don't have to, Gu Wenchen persuaded Lao Song. If it was because of money, David would not come. Yes, yes, they are not short of money at all. Lao Song nodded again and again. After all, he saw that Sonia and David came in luxury cars, how could they be short of money? I caught a few chickens and ducks for Mr. Chen and went back to stew them. They were all raised by me and have never been fed, Lao Song said, and he was going to catch a few chickens and ducks for David. David hurriedly stopped and said, Uncle Song, don't be polite to me. If you really want to thank me, can you give me the Ganodermalocidum? I can pay for it. Lao Song was stunned for a moment and looked at David with a puzzled face. Mr. Chen, don't you say that this thing has no medicinal value and is poisonous? What do you want this thing to do? This thing must be used in the hands of ordinary people, but I need to practice, David can just use this kind of thing in his practice. If he can absorb the essence of Ganoderma lucidum, David believes that his strength will definitely improve a lot. Since Mr. Chen is useful, I'll give it to you directly. Anyway, it's thrown away in my hands. I don't dare to stay at home. Without any hesitation, Lao Song gave David the Ganoderma lucidum in his hand. David wanted to give Lao Song money, but Lao Song refused, and he didn't ask for David's money at all. After leaving the old Song family, Sonia was a little disappointed. I thought I could see some novel things, but there is nothing. Looking at Sonia's disappointed look, David smiled lightly. There are so many ghosts, but if you have a chance to see it, don't faint from fright. With you protecting me, I won't faint. Sonia smiled at David. After sending David home, Sonia left directly, and just after David went upstairs, behind a big tree in the yard of the community, Wang Hanin slowly showed his figure, looking at David's back, with mixed feelings in his heart. She had been secretly waiting for David here for a long time. She wanted to see who this woman was, but because it was too dark, Sonia didn't get out of the car, and Wang Hanin still didn't get her wish. Daughter, go home. If David really chooses a rich girl, that's also the choice of others. Wang Chongfeng gently patted Wang Hanin's shoulder and said. Yet. Wang Hanin nodded, her eyes were already wet. After David returned home, he rested early. Tomorrow Saturday, he happened to go to Pine Bay, where the spiritual energy was relatively full, and no one bothered him. He just absorbed the essence of this meat Ganoderma lucidum. At the same time, in the office of General Manager Xian Hechuang, Jordan was sitting face to face with Liao Fixiang with his injured arm on his back. Master Xiao, you asked someone to contact me, what's the matter? Liao Fixiang poured a cup of tea for Jordan himself and said. After all, the Xiao family is also a wealthy family in Horindal. Although the Along gang is not afraid of the Xiao family, after all, these wealthy families are the god of wealth. Liao Fixiang knows that Jordan came today to send money. Brother Xiang, I have always heard that Brother Xiang is very powerful. When I saw him today, it really lived up to its reputation. With the muscles of Brother Xiang, 3 or 5 strong men can't stand by. Jordan touted Liao Fixiang. Haha, young Master Xiao doesn't have to be like this. If you have something to say, if I can do it, Liao will never refuse. Liao Fixiang laughed. Brother Xiang, to be honest, I have an enemy, and I want Brother Xiang to help me with revenge. After this is done, I will give you 10 million as a reward. I have 5 million here, which is a deposit, Jordan said, and pushed a bank card in front of Liao Fixiang. Ha ha ha, he is indeed a wealthy son, and his shot is really rich. Liao Fixiang was a little surprised. Jordan's shot turned out to be 10 million. But after laughing twice, Liao Fixiang suddenly stopped smiling, looked at Jordan with a dignified face and asked, I know that the Xiao family is kind to Lin Tianhu. Since you want to seek revenge on your enemy, why not look for Lin Tianhu? Besides, your Xiao family employs a lot of bodyguards, right? Are you still looking for my Along gang? Our Along gang and Juyatang have always been at odds with each other. Young Master Xiao abandoned Juyatang, but came to my Along gang. Isn't this not looking for distance? Liao Fixiang knew some of the grievances of the Xiao family following Lin Tianhu. After all, this is no secret. Humph, don't mention the ungrateful guy Lin Tianhu. If it weren't for my Xiao family, Lin Tianhu would have become a bone by now, and now Lin Tianhu has become the dog of the Sui family, and he would have cut off with Xiao Jian long ago. As soon as Jordan heard Lin Tianhu, he scolded angrily, and then said, as long as our Xiao family's bodyguards, I can't mobilize any of them, they only listen to my dad's orders, my dad still thinks I am recuperating in the hospital. He, I understand. Liao Fixiang nodded. Recently, Lin Tianhu has indeed followed the Sui family closer. Young Master Xiao's enemy will not be the second generation of officials, right? I can tell you that our Ilong gang has never dealt with the official family, Brother Xiang, don't worry, he's just an ordinary person, he just has some kung fu, he's not a second generation official, Jordan quickly shook his head. That's good. Tomorrow, I will ask Shui to bring a dozen brothers to find young Master Xiao. As for how to deal with the enemy, young Master Xiao, make up your own mind, Liao Fixiang said lightly. Brother Xiang, can you send more people? Jordan asked nervously when he heard that Liao Fixiang only sent a dozen people. After all, David's strength is too strong, but he saw David knock down several people with his own eyes. What? How strong is your enemy? A dozen people are not enough. Liao Fixiang was slightly taken aback. No, it's not that strong, I just want to bring more people, isn't it more prestige? Jordan kept an eye on it. He didn't dare to follow Liao Fixiang to say that David's strength was very strong. He was afraid that Liao Fixiang would back down or ask him to pay more. Okay, since Mr. Xiao said so, then I will send 30 people to help Mr. Xiao, and I hope we can cooperate for a long time in the future. Liao Fixiang got up and shook hands with Jordan. Then thank you Brother Bear, Jordan said happily. After coming out from Xian and Zhuang, Jordan got into the car, and Delia was waiting for him in the car. Brother Lei, how's it going? Delia asked anxiously. Humph, I'll wait and see David kneeling in front of us and begging for mercy tomorrow. I'm going to stomp him underfoot and let him know how good I am. Jordan's eyes flashed with coldness, and he said proudly. Early the next morning, David told his parents and went to the Pinerist Villa with Rolling Z. At this time, at the entrance of the Pinerist Villa area, Kui Ziwen, Sun Xiaomeng and Wang Lanlan were arguing with the security guard at the entrance. Why don't you let us in? We're here to buy a house, is that how you treat your clients? Sun Xiaomeng roared loudly at the security guard. I was in a very good mood. I came to see the house in Pine Bay. If the commission is down, I can make a down payment here. Although I can't buy a villa on the mountain, I can get a loan for a house at the foot of the mountain. But who knew that when they got here, the security did not let them in, which made Sun Xiaomeng very angry. If you buy a house, you can go to the sales office next door. You can't go in until you become the owner, the security guard said to Sun Xiaomeng indifferently. How can we buy it if we don't go in to see the house type? Sun Xiaomeng is still arguing. If you want to see the house, you can bring it in with the salesman, you can't go in alone. This is our rule, the security is still blocking the door to prevent them from entering. Xiaomeng, forget it, let's go to the sales office first, and then let the salesman bring it in, Kui Ziwen pulled Sun Xiaomeng and said. Although Kui Ziwen was also angry, he didn't dare to make trouble. This is Pine, the best community in the whole Horndal. All the big people live here. He is a small department manager, how dare he make trouble here? Seeing this, Sun Xiaomeng could only glared at the security guard and said, wait, when I become the owner, let the property manager fire you first. The three of Kui Ziwen left and went to the sales office, but the security guard sneered, what, you really take yourself as a character? Not long after Kui Ziwen and the others left the door, David drove over, his second-hand Chang'an. After the security guard saw David's car from a distance, he immediately waved his hand to signal David to stop. These security guards have been working in Pine Bay for some time, and they have never seen the owners who live here, and some drive Chang'an cars. David stopped the car, and a security guard ran over quickly, wanting to ask what David did. But when David rolled down the car window, the security guard was stunned when he saw David. It took a while to react. It turned out to be Mr. Chen. "I'm really sorry, David has been living in the villa on the top of the mountain some time ago. You must know that the villa is the most expensive in the entire Pine Bay, so these security guards know David." "It's okay." David smiled lightly. Soon, the security guard waved his hand. "Hurry up and open the door, it's Mr. Chen." When the security guard at the door heard that it was David, he hurriedly opened the door. When David drove past, the security guards hurriedly saluted. But just as David's car was about to enter the door, suddenly a red Maserati rushed in front of David, trying to surpass David and enter the community. David failed to brake and hit the rear end of the Maserati directly, which made several security guards a little dumbfounded. None of them thought that a car would suddenly rush over and a car accident happened. This is at the gate of the community. When such a thing happens, these security guards are responsible, so these security guards are looking at the red Maserati angrily. "How the H3LL did you drive? A broken Chang'an car dares to hit my car? Do you know how much my car costs?" A woman wearing sunglasses and a fashionable straw hat on her head got out of the car, watched her beloved car get hit, and cursed directly at David. Originally, David wanted to settle the matter calmly. It was the other party's fault. He even overtaken the car at a place like the gate of the community. "It's obvious that you came in front of you suddenly, why do you blame me for hitting your car?" David questioned the woman. "What? You broke Chang'an, what's in the doorway? Can you come to this place?" The woman looked at David with contempt, and then shouted at several security guards, "How do you all keep watch? Can such a car be put in the community? It's too embarrassing for our community, and it also smears the faces of our owners." Several security guards looked at the arrogant woman and dared not speak out. After all, they were security guards and could not provoke the woman in front of them. David looked at the arrogant look of the woman and wanted to slap her twice, but he thought that he had to hurry up to practice and was unwilling to waste time, so he said to the woman, "Tell me how much it costs." "I don't have time to talk to you here." Seeing that David was still a little impatient, the woman immediately raised her voice and said, "Do you know how much my car is worth? It's more than 2 million. If you hit this, it won't be repaired without 10 or 200,000 yuan. It's not enough to pay me for the car." "Don't talk nonsense, just say the number." David frowned slightly. "You dare to say nonsense to me? Believe it or not, old lady," as the woman said, she raised her hand and wanted to slap David, but David grabbed it and slapped the woman in the face. The woman flew out with the sunglasses, and even the straw hat on her head flew, which made the arrogant woman stunned. She never thought that David would dare to do something to herself. Where did a person who broke Chang'an have the courage? "Good boy, you dare to hit me, I won't kill you today, my mother is not finished," the woman growled, took out her phone and started calling. When several security guards saw David beat the woman, they felt relieved for a while, but they also knew that this action would make things worse, and a security guard hurried to call the property manager. The woman finished the phone call, and then glared at David with those phoenix eyes. "Boy, wait for me, my husband will come and hack you to death. I don't have time to write with you here, if you don't move the car, I'll knock you out." David doesn't want to be entangled with women. He hasn't practiced well in this period of time. David needs to hurry up and practice. "How dare you hit my car? You can hit it if you can, and I won't let you go bankrupt," the woman yelled, she didn't believe that David really dared to bump. This is $1 million luxury car, and David can't afford it. Seeing the woman like that, David knew that it was useless to say anything, so he got in the car and prepared to knock the Maserati in front of him away. But at this moment, Kuizaiwan and the others were brought over by a sales lady, ready to go in to see the house. David! After seeing David, Sun Xiaomeng shouted in surprise. After all, not everyone can come to this place. People like David who have no money or power rarely come here, but I don't know what David is doing here. Seeing that it was Sun Xiaomeng and Kuizaiwan, David asked casually, "Why are you here? Why are you still asking us? Why are you here? We are here to buy a house. What are you doing here?" Kuizaiwan looked at David with contempt, and then at David's car following in front of him. The Maserati collided with each other, and immediately gloated, "David, your driving skills are not good, why did you crash? Do you want to break in behind other people's cars?" At this time, Wang Lanlan also found that David's car collided with other people's cars, and it was a Maserati, and suddenly screamed, "David, you have won the lottery, you can't hit any car, but you hit a Maserati. This car costs several million, and your car insurance probably won't cover it. If I can afford it, I won't bother you, it's my own business," David said coldly. "David, I can tell you that it is impossible for the company to pay you early wages. You are driving around in a broken car, and now you are afraid that your family will go bankrupt." The corners of Kuizaiwan's mouth raised high, unable to hide the excitement on his face. "David, what the H3LL is going on? You're in trouble now," Sun Xiaomeng frowned slightly and asked David. "It's nothing serious, didn't it just crash and get off?" David smiled lightly, in his eyes, "This is nothing at all. Crash and get off the car? Please widen your eyes, what kind of car is this hitting? This is a Maserati, a car worth millions, do you understand?" Wang Lanlan sneered. "David, I advise you to ride an electric car at ordinary times. You are not suitable for driving. If you hit a Maserati today and a Porsche tomorrow, even if you sell it, you won't be able to afford it," Kuizaiwan persuaded David earnestly, but his eyes were full of playfulness. At this time, the woman on the other side saw that Kuizaiwan and the others were sneering at David, and she was even more convinced that David was just a useless guy with no skills, so she shouted, "Boy, aren't you crazy? My car was knocked away, if you have the ability, you can hit it." The woman is provoking David, constantly stimulating David. David was too lazy to talk nonsense with him, so he got into the car and planned to knock the Maserati away. "David, you're crazy, come down here," Sun Xiaomeng grabbed David and said, "Do you know how much this car is worth? If you hit it on impulse, even if you go bankrupt, you won't be able to afford to sell the house." Sun Xiaomeng didn't want to take care of David, but when it happened to such a big thing as Maserati, Sun Xiaomeng couldn't help but ask, "This is going to cost a lot of money. Borrow money? Xiaomeng, what do you care about him? Isn't he awesome? Let him hit it, and if he can't afford it, let him go to jail, anyway, it's not like he hasn't done it." Kuizaiwan's face was cold, and he was very dissatisfied with Sun Xiaomen stopping David. "If you really hit it, it will cost you millions. It's not a joke. Even if the David family sells the house, they can't afford it. What will you ask his parents to do then?" Sun Xiaomeng glared at Kuizaiwan and said. Although Sun Xiaomeng doesn't like David, and doesn't like David's family very much, after all, in her heart, the David family is just looking at her family's wealth, and deliberately came to curry favor with her. But it doesn't mean that Sun Xiaomeng wants David's family to be destroyed. When Kui Ziwen saw that Sun Xiaomeng was actually protecting David, his eyes were full of anger. David glanced at Sun Xiaomeng, and his opinion of Sun Xiaomeng changed a lot in his heart. It seems that this Sun Xiaomeng is not particularly bad. Right at this moment, 2 vans came swiftly, followed by a dozen or so vicious big men with sticks in their hands. "Husband," the woman ran towards a man in sportswear, and then said coquettishly, "Husband, someone hit me just now, look at my face." The man looked at the woman's face, and suddenly became angry. His face became cold and said, "Who the H3LL beat my wife? Stand up for me." David took 2 steps forward. "I hit it." The man glanced at David, then looked at Kui Ziwen and the others behind David, and said coldly, "Boy, you kneel in front of my wife to apologize. I may still save your life, otherwise, just the few of you, don't even try to run away." When Kui Ziwen heard this, the man actually regarded them and David as being together, and he waved his hands in fright to explain, Big brother, you misunderstood, we are not together, although we know each other, but what he did, I don't know at all." The man looked at his wife, the woman nodded and said, "Just this kid, he not only hit my car, but also slapped me. Boy, let's just count the car crash. You slap my wife, and if you kneel now, you can still survive." The man looked at David with murderous expression. David smiled lightly, "Do you guys particularly like people to kneel? But let me tell you, I can't kneel anyone except my parents, and you don't deserve me to kneel." "Boy, what did you say?" The man was stunned for a moment, and then burst into anger. He couldn't believe that David alone, facing so many people, had the courage to say such a thing. "David, are you crazy? You are courting death," Sun Xiaomeng reprimanded David loudly. And Kui Ziwen said with a sneer on his face, "David, this time has come, so don't pretend to be forceful. Even if you kneel down, we won't laugh at you, let alone pass it on to you in the company." "That's right, we won't say it, just kneel down, or you'll be beaten up in a while, and you'll still have to kneel down." Wang Lanlin also smiled and said, "You guys like to kneel so much, you can kneel," David said to Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlin. "Humph, if you have the ability, continue to be mad, and see who will kneel and beg for mercy later," Kui Ziwen snorted coldly. The man saw that David was very strong, so he didn't kneel at all, and said with a cold face, "Boy, you have some bones, but when you meet me today, no matter how hard you are, I will make you soft." After speaking, the man waved his hand and said, "Give it to me, let him be abolished." Soon, more than a dozen people rushed towards David. When Kui Ziwen and the others saw this, they were so frightened that they hurried to hide far away. Although Sun Xiaomeng was anxious, she couldn't take care of it at this time. "Stop!" With an angry shout, I saw a property manager in a suit rushing over with several security guards. "Manager Zhang, what do you mean? Do you want to stop me?" When the man saw the property manager, he asked with a displeased expression. "Brother, give me a face, let's forget about today's affairs, what's the loss, I'll take care of it," the property manager said to the man with a smile on his face. It seems that 2 people know each other. After all, one is the owner and the other is the property manager. It is not surprising that they know each other. "Manager Zhang, did you take the wrong medicine today or is this kid your relative? How can you plead for him?" the man asked in confusion. After Manager Zhang looked at David, he slowly leaned into the man's ear and said, "Brother, you don't know, this Mr. Chen lives in a villa on the top of the mountain. He has lived there for a while." When the man heard it, he was stunned. Isn't that the Sui family's villa? That's right, since he can live in, he must have something to do with the Sui family. Manager Zhang nodded. The man glanced at David, his eyes full of disbelief. I don't believe that this kid has anything to do with the Sui family, just like him, I'm afraid he can't fight with the Sui family, and drives a car to break Chang'an, how could he follow Su? My family has something to do with it, Manager Zhang, don't lie to me, it won't give you face today. The man didn't believe it at all. How could David be related to the richest man Su's family in his clothes and the Chang'an car? Brother, I really didn't lie to you, Mr. Chen, but before Manager Zhang's words were finished, he was pushed away by the man. If he doesn't kneel down today, it's useless even if the King of Heaven is here, I won't give any face to me. After the man finished speaking, with one look, he would let his subordinates do it. Seeing this, Manager Zhang hurriedly gave the salesman a wink and asked her to take away Kui Ziwen and the others quickly. The fewer people you see, the better. If this is spread out or recorded just like, the reputation of their Pine Bay has plummeted. Seeing this, the salesperson hurriedly called Kui Ziwen and the others to leave. Kui Ziwen was a little reluctant. He wanted to see David being beaten with his own eyes. It's a pity that such a wonderful scene is not allowed to watch, Kui Ziwen said disappointedly. No, let this guy David pretend all day long. This time, he will be unlucky. Wang Lanlin also sneered. Only Sun Xiaomeng frowned slightly, and she was a little worried in her heart. If this really cost people's lives, it would be troublesome. Xiaomeng, aren't you still worried about David? Haven't you always hated him? Seeing Sun Xiaomeng like this, Wang Lanlin asked. Hate is hate, but you can't just watch him lose his life. Sun Xiaomeng looked sad, or let's call the police. Call the police, don't you see how vicious that man is? If you knew we called the police, maybe the whole family would be killed by him, Kui Ziwen threatened Sun Xiaomeng. Sure enough, after saying this, Sun Xiaomeng was so frightened that she didn't dare to report the matter to the police. At this time, at the entrance of Pine Bay, David's subordinates had all been brought down, and they were just a bunch of gangsters. It only took David 10 seconds to solve it. Seeing David's skill so well, that Easter's face changed slightly with fright, and the woman became even more panicked. Do you still need me to kneel down and apologize? David looked at the brother and asked with a cold smile. The muscles in the corners of the brother's eyes kept twitching, and finally he gritted his teeth and said, Boy, are you good at fighting? I tell you, I have written down your license plate number, I can find out what your name is, where you live. Where, if you can fight, I don't believe your family can fight. Brother Dong threatened David with his family, but he didn't know that this had touched David's inverse scale. Are you threatening me? David's eyes burst out with murderous aura, and the terrifying murderous aura directly shrouded that brother. Brother Dong couldn't help shaking, only to feel the cold wind digging into his neck. Boy, you don't have to look at me like this, don't you dare to kill me in front of everyone. Brother Dong also gritted his teeth, his face full of sternness. If you don't kill me today, I will kill your whole family when I get the chance. This guy actually started to play rascal with David, with an expression like a dead pig is not afraid of boiling water. You are courting death. David's murderous aura became stronger and stronger, and when Manager Zhang saw this, he hurriedly stopped in front of David. Mr. Chen, forget it, it's not a big deal. Manager Zhang, I don't want a murder in front of my community, and he can't afford to offend either of these two people, and I don't want anyone to have an accident. David did not speak, but lightly took out his mobile phone and called Lin Tianhu. 10 minutes to the entrance of Pine Community, after just saying one sentence, David hung up the phone. When Brother Dong saw that David could shake people, the corner of his mouth suddenly raised. I really can't see, you can shake people. I want to see who you called. Brother Dong said, and also made a phone call, obviously calling someone. Soon, several vans came quickly, followed by more people, all with sticks. When the brother saw that the person he had called had arrived, he immediately said proudly, "Boy, where is the person you called? Wouldn't you dare to come?" "It's here," David said lightly. "I saw not far away, a car was driving towards this side at a high speed, and the speed was extremely fast." The older brother saw that there was only one car coming, and immediately laughed, "Are you fucking kidding me? Just call a car, how many people can it hold? Even if you can fight, I can keep going. Call someone, even if you are tired, you can be exhausted to death. I hope that after seeing people, you still keep the smile you are now," David sneered. Soon, the car came to the front, and then a burly man opened the door and walked down. When he saw the person clearly, the smile on that brother's face instantly solidified on his face. Everyone else also took a breath of air. It was Lin Tianhe who came, and he was the only one. After walking quickly to David, Lin Tianhe respectfully shouted, "Mr. Chen." Seeing that Lin Tianhe was being so polite to David, the eldest brother was dumbfounded on the spot, shaking all over. "Get rid of him," David looked at the brother and said. Lin Tianhe nodded and turned to face his shivering brother. Lin Tianhe's eyes swept around, and all the people called by the eldest brother turned pale with fright, and hurriedly threw away the weapons in their hands. "You still don't get out, are you staying to find death?" Lin Tianhe shouted loudly, scaring away all those people called by Donga. What a joke, the dignified underground emperor of Horindal, how dare these little BA5TARDS dare to provoke them? Tiger! Tiger Lord! The brother trembled and shouted at Lin Tianhe. Lin Tianhe stepped forward and slapped that brother in the face. Brother Dong didn't dare to move at all, while his wife gave up a little, and immediately yelled at Lin Tianhe, "Who are you? Why beat people?" The woman roared at Lin Tianhe, but he was so frightened that he almost fainted. Snapped! The eldest brother gave his wife a slap in the face. "The stinky bitches of Malagofi, who told you to speak, do you have a share in speaking here?" Brother Dong had already cursed his wife to death at this time. If she hadn't provoked David and called him, how could he have disturbed Lin Tianhe? And looking at Lin Tianhe's respectful attitude towards David, it is obvious that David's identity is not ordinary. But he just couldn't figure it out, how could such a person with status drive a broken Chang'an? The woman was beaten by her husband with a blue nose and a swollen face, and the whole person will be disfigured. But Brother Dong knew in his heart that if he didn't act ruthlessly, I'm afraid both of them would die. "Master Hu, the woman is open-minded, I hope Master Hu won't be angry." East brother desperately followed Lin Tianhe to apologize. But Lin Tianhe didn't appreciate it at all. He pulled Dong Ji's collar and punched him in the lower abdomen, and Dong Ji fell to his knees in pain. David slowly walked in front of the buddy and looked down at the buddy. "Didn't you just ask me to kneel down and apologize? Why are you kneeling now?" David asked with a little playfulness. The brother didn't dare to look up, and kowtowed desperately, "I beg Mr. Chen to raise your hand, I'm not human, I'm blind," brother desperately begging for mercy. "I didn't want to kill you, but unfortunately you threatened my family." After David finished speaking, he didn't pay attention to the brother, but got into the car and drove the Maserati away, and drove into the community. With David's words, Lin Tianhe knew what to do, and no matter how the brother begged for mercy, he was still taken into the car by Lin Tianhe, and all that awaited him was death. And the woman was dumbfounded when she saw her husband being taken away and the Maserati who was hit beyond recognition. After a while, Manager Zhang followed many security guards to react, and Manager Zhang said to the security guards, "When I see Mr. Chen in the future, they will be respectful to me. Whoever dares to be disrespectful to Mr. Chen will get the H3LL out of here right away." At this time, David was driving up the mountain. He had just walked for a while, but he encountered Kui Ziwen and the others again. Several people had already seen the house and were being led away by the sales lady. Seeing David coming in with the battered Chang'an in front of him, everyone was stunned. They couldn't understand how David got in. This David must have rushed in while no one was paying attention. It is estimated that he was afraid of being beaten. Wang Lanlin looked at David's smashed front and said, "This guy is so daring, he even dares to enter Pine Bay," Kui Ziwen sneered. Hearing the conversation between the two, the sales lady seemed to have thought of something, so she rushed over and stopped David. If David really broke in and stopped him now, the company will definitely reward him at that time. The sales lady's idea is very naive. Because she does not belong to the property, she does not know about David's residence in Pine Bay. "You are so brave, you dare to drive in." After the sales lady stopped David, she asked loudly. David was slightly taken aback. "I drove in directly, I didn't break in, your manager saw it." "David, stop quibbling. Look at what happened to your car. You must be afraid of being beaten and drove in. I guess someone is chasing you behind." Wang Lanlin also walked over with a sneer. "David, only the owners here can enter the community. We bought a house, but we were brought in. You didn't buy a house, and you're not the owner, so you rushed in directly. Isn't this a break-in?" Kui Ziwen asked with the corner of his mouth raised. "Who told you that I'm not the owner anymore?" David said lightly. Hearing David's words, everyone was stunned. The sales lady hurriedly asked, "You bought a house here? Why don't I have an impression?" The sales lady looked at David and felt that David didn't look like someone who could buy a house here, and the people who bought the house here were either rich or expensive. Many sales girls knew each other and even had contact information. "David, can you stop bragging? Do you know how much the houses here cost? Let's just say these bungalows at the foot of the mountain, even if they are the smallest units, you can't afford them in your whole life. How dare you say that you are the owner here?" Kui Ziwen said with a look of contempt, "I have been a manager for so many years, and after adding bonus commissions, I can buy the cheapest house here, and I only need to pay a down payment. You are a guy who just made it, where can you buy a house? I think you can't even afford to buy a house in the suburbs, you're only fit to live in an old and dilapidated community." Kui Ziwen's face was full of disdain. He didn't believe David would buy a house here. Not only Kui Ziwen didn't believe it, Wang Lanlin and Sun Xiaomeng didn't believe it. If David had the ability to buy a house here, how could Sun Xiaomeng find him a job? "Sir, since you said that you are the owner here, then point out that the house is yours? You don't have to think about deceiving me, because I know who the owners of the houses here are," the sales lady asked David. "Yes, you have the ability to point it out. Which one is yours? How about we go to your house and sit down?" Wang Lanlin asked with a half smile but not a smile. David pointed at the top of the mountain. "The set on the top of the mountain is mine, the one on the top of the mountain." Kui Ziwen was stunned for a moment, and then burst out laughing. "David, you're fucking kidding me, do you know how much a villa on the top of the mountain is worth? You can't afford to sell your whole family. You brag a bit too big, it's unrealistic. David, can you live a little more realistically?" Today, you are trying to break into Pine Bay. I'm afraid it will be the first time in your life that you will enter this community, and I'm afraid it will be the last time. You dare to say that the hilltop villa is yours? I think you haven't even been to the top of the mountain, have you? Wang Lanlin laughed too. Sun Xiaomeng gave David a blank look. In her eyes, David was just a douchebag who couldn't get up, and he couldn't stick to the wall. This gentleman, do you know the value of the villa on the top of the mountain? You dare to talk about it here? The sales lady also laughed. Why do you say that I am open-mouthed? David asked coldly. I sold that villa. The owner of the villa's surname is Su, but he doesn't seem to be surnamed Chen. How do you say it's yours? The sales lady looked at David sneeringly, as if waiting for David to explain. Can't that be given to me by someone else? David said with a smile. Give it to you. The sales lady covered her mouth and smiled. Yes, yes, you can say that the entire Pine Bay was given to you by others, it's not illegal, but you broke into Pine Bay without permission, according to our community. The rules are to drive you out. Just after the sales lady finished speaking, a guy wearing a security uniform and holding a baton came over. Xiaolan, why are you free to come around the community today? When the security guard saw the sales lady, he immediately said with a flattering smile. It turned out to be Captain Wang. Someone broke into the community and just kicked him out. After the sales lady saw the security guard, she immediately kept David. The security guard glanced at David, then looked at the Chang'an car that had already hit the potholes beside David, and suddenly said angrily, Damn, there are people who dare to break into the community I am in charge of, don't you want to live? I am the security captain here, don't ask about it, brother security guard, this David just hit a luxury car at the door, and people are going to beat him. It is estimated that he was afraid of being beaten and drove in directly. If you catch him, it will be a great achievement. Kui Ziwan said to the security captain. Yes, yes, we all saw it just now, he hit a Maserati. Wang Lanlin also nodded again and again. Sun Xiaomeng didn't speak, but her face was not very good looking. She didn't want to care about David. This guy's bragging personality made her very disgusted. Good boy, if you hit a car and dare to break in, you are out of luck when you meet me today. The security captain said, and grabbed David. But when he reached out his hand, David grabbed his wrist, twisted it lightly, and directly controlled the security captain. The severe pain instantly made the security captain scream. Boy, it hurts to death, let me go, do you know who I am? The property manager here is my brother-in-law, if you dare to touch me, I promise you won't get out of here. The security captain roared. You didn't know anything about it, so you shot at me directly. How did you become the security captain? I said, I am the owner here. Is this how you serve the owner? David questioned the security captain. You let go, I'll just ask. The captain of the security saw David meeting twice, and he was not an opponent, so he could only let David let go of himself first. Seeing this, David released the security captain, and the security captain rubbed his wrist, looked at David viciously, and then took out the walkie-talkie. All the security guards came to gather in Area A, and someone broke into the community and attacked me. The security captain directly used the walkie-talkie to start calling people. He was just trying to slow down the army and let David let go of himself. As for whether David is the owner's business, he won't ask. It can be seen with his eyes that David can't be the owner. Boy, my people will be here soon, you just wait to be beaten, the security captain looked at David coldly and said. At this time, Manager Zhang, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, suddenly heard his brother-in-law shouting on the walkie-talkie, and also said that someone broke into the community and beat him, and Manager Zhang's heart suddenly lifted. He wasn't worried about his brother-in-law, but he was afraid that his brother-in-law who didn't have enough food and what he could do would get into trouble. His brother-in-law was so lazy to do it. Finally, after begging him for a long time, he agreed to let him come here as a security guard. Team leader. I have just been here for 2 days, and I don't want to do anything. I mess with flowers everywhere. The little girls in the sales office are all familiar. When Manager Zhang ran to Area A with many security guards, David's car was parked there from a distance, and David was standing beside the car, and the cold sweat on Manager Zhang's forehead instantly flowed down. I'm afraid of what's coming, this time my brother-in-law is a big disaster. Manager Zhang hurriedly ran over, and the security captain saw his brother-in-law brought someone in person, and immediately greeted him and said, "Brother-in-law, this guy broke into the community, and he just attacked me, he must teach him a good lesson." And Kui Ziwen saw the property manager with the security chasing after him, and immediately said with a sneer, "David, I see where you are going, although it's not illegal to brag, but if you brag too much, you have to pay. For the price, you still dare to say that you are the owner here and still live in the house on the top floor, why don't you say that you live in the sky? I've lived for more than 20 years, and this is the first time I've seen such a shameless brag." Wang Lanlan covered her mouth and smiled. The eyes of the two were full of playfulness, ready to wait for a good show. However, Sun Xiaomeng sighed, thinking that if David is really going to be beaten, he will talk to himself and see if it works, but he can't just watch David be beaten. But while Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlan were waiting for the property manager to bring someone over to teach David a good lesson, they saw that the manager slapped his brother-in-law fiercely. This slap was very powerful. Almost knocked the security captain to the ground. This time, the security captain was stunned and looked at his brother-in-law with an unbelievable face. "Brother-in-law, why are you hitting me? Did you take the wrong medicine?" the security captain asked dissatisfied. "Yes, I took the wrong medicine. I shouldn't have let you come to work." "What kind of security captain? You've been fired now, get out of here, get away as far as you want, and never come again." Manager Zhang snatched the baton from his brother-in-law's hand and said. "You," the security captain glared at Manager Zhang, "okay, if you dare to treat me like this, I'll tell my sister to go," the security captain said and left immediately. Manager Zhang's operation made Kui Ziwen and the others bewildered. Even the sales lady didn't know what was going on. Only the security guards who brought him knew that Manager Zhang was saving his brother-in-law. If the security captain continued to stay at the scene, David would be unhappy and directly kill him. After the security captain left, Manager Zhang looked at David with a cold sweat on his head. He was afraid that David would speak, and he would not let his brother-in-law leave. However, seeing that David did not say anything, Manager Zhang was relieved. After walking quickly to David, Manager Zhang said humbly, "Mr. Chen, I'm really sorry, my brother-in-law just came here, and I don't know anything. Your lord has a lot of..." Seeing that the property manager followed David to apologize in such a low-key manner, Kui Ziwen and the others were dumbfounded. "I said, did you make a mistake? He broke into your community without authorization, and even hit the car and beat up your brother-in-law. Are you still so lowly? Do you have such a good service attitude in your property?" Kui Ziwen looked at the property manager and asked. "That's right, just now we were going to come in to see a house and buy a house. Your security guards stopped us from entering, but you were so polite to an intruder. I really doubt the ability of your property." Isn't it a prisoner of labor reform? As for you? Is it so low-key? He really treats him as the owner of your community. Wang Lanlan said with a sneer. If he could buy a house here, he wouldn't have to drive a broken Chang'an. He also said that the house on the top of the mountain belongs to him. He's just bragging. I know him too well. We work in a company, and I'm his immediate boss. This guy can't do anything but brag. Kui Ziwen continued to say to the manager. The manager Zhang looked at Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlan, and then at David. He didn't know what their relationship was, but Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlan mocked David so much, so these people definitely couldn't be friends. Seeing that David had not spoken, manager Zhang couldn't stand it any longer, and said to Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlan, Mr. Chen is indeed the owner of our place, and the villa on the top of the mountain is indeed his. As soon as manager Zhang finished speaking, Kui Ziwen and Wang Lanlan were stunned, and Sun Xiaomeng was also stunned. Manager Zhang, the owner of the hilltop villa is Su. I did the formalities myself, the sales lady asked manager Zhang questioningly. Did you make a mistake? The mountaintop villa will cost over 100 million at least to start. You say that a person who breaks through Chang'an and becomes a salesman can be the owner of the mountaintop villa? I don't believe it if I kill him. You are too unqualified as a property manager. Don't you know who owns the house you manage? You don't even look at David. Does he look like he owns a villa? Kui Ziwen followed Wang Lanlan and questioned manager Zhang. Looking at the questions from several people, manager Zhang sneered, it seems that you know more than me, the property manager. Let me tell you, the owner of the hilltop villa was indeed surnamed Su, but now it is Mr. Chen's. If there is nothing else, you can leave now, and you are not allowed to enter the community in the future. Manager Zhang's words made Kui Ziwen and the others all bewildered. No one would believe that David owned a villa worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Manager Zhang, can I go now? David didn't want to waste time with Kui Ziwen and the others, he was going to hurry up and practice. Of course, I'm really sorry for delaying Mr. Chen's time. Manager Zhang immediately changed into a humble look and opened the car door for David in person. David drove Chang'an, which had been hit beyond recognition, and drove directly to the top of the mountain. When it was time to pass Kui Ziwen and the others, David rolled down the car window and deliberately sneered at Kui Ziwen. I don't believe it, I absolutely don't believe it, he can't have a villa, I have to follow up to see. He must be bragging, Kui Ziwen roared like crazy. And Sun Xiaomeng watched David's car go farther and farther, and felt a burning hot feeling on her face. Things have come to this point, then David will definitely not be bragging, because she doesn't believe that David can buy such a big property manager to accompany her. He is bragging. Thinking that the villa was worth hundreds of millions, but at first he disliked his family's poverty. Even if he was looking for a job for David, he was forced by his father. Thinking of this, Sun Xiaomen's face became even hotter. That Wang Lanlan stared at the back of David's car with wide eyes, until the tail lights disappeared. Wang Lanlan's eyes were still looking at the road to the top of the mountain without even blinking. The huge shock made Wang Lanlan stunned. Kick them all out, and don't allow them to enter the community in the future, the property manager ordered loudly. More than a dozen security guards quickly kicked Kui Ziwen and the others out. Because of the stimulation, Kui Ziwen desperately wanted to go to the top of the mountain to confirm whether David was bragging. Just honestly left. After David drove to the villa, he opened the door and found that it was still clean and spotless. Sonia should have sent someone to clean it. Sonia always hoped that she could talk to her parents, and then let her parents come back, but Chen I would like to wait a few days to talk about it. After all, My parents are happily worrying about him and Wang Hanin. David sat on the sofa, took out Rolling Z and put it on the coffee table, feeling the strong spiritual energy emanating from Rolling Z. David was very excited. This meat Ganodermalocidum has become aconite, which is rare in 1,000 years. I hope that after absorbing this meat Ganodermalocidum, my realm can be improved. David now has an excellent cultivation method. If he wants to increase his strength, the only thing he lacks is aura. But now there is a lack of aura on the earth. Only on such a mountain top can the aura be filled. To increase strength, other methods are needed. After thinking about it for a while, David calmed down, and the concentration art began to slowly run. David's whole body was soon shrouded in a faint mist. As if feeling something, the Ganodermalocidum in the glass bottle twisted wildly, as if trying to break through the glass bottle and escape. But no matter how the Ganodermalocidum twisted, it was of no use at all. Soon, Ganodermalocidum slowly stopped moving, and in a place similar to an eye, gas mixed with pale pink rushed out, and soon floating towards David. David opened his mouth slowly and sucked in a little force. The pale pink gas suddenly accelerated and was directly sucked into the body by David, and the fleshy Ganoderma shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was originally pink and fair. The appearance like a girl's skin is beginning to become wrinkled and dry at this moment. Soon, Ganodermalocidum turned into a mass of powder. In the end, all the powder was sucked into David's body. David sat on the sofa like that, his eyes slightly closed. Time passed, I don't know how long it took, until it was almost dark. David slowly opened his eyes. David, who was full of joy, hurriedly inspected his danshan. At this time, except for the spiritual power in his danshan, David's realm did not improve. Hey! David sighed heavily, and finally got up and left the villa. David drove the damaged Chang'an car away from Pine Bay and found a repair shop to put the car there. David took a taxi and was ready to go home. But when David was waiting for the car on the side of the road, a red BMW stopped in front of him, the window was open, and Sun Xiaomeng stuck his head out. David, where are you going? I'll take you off. David was stunned for a moment. Sun Xiaomen's sudden attitude towards him made David a little not used to it. I go home, David said lightly. Come up, I happen to be on the way, and I'll send you a paragraph. Sun Xiaomeng opened the door in the car. Moreover, Sun Xiaomeng opened the co-pilot. You must know that she would never let David sit in her car before, and even if she did, she could only be in the back row. David didn't know what the H3LL this Sun Xiaomeng was doing, and suddenly it seemed like a different person. Come up, Sun Xiaomeng urged David to see that David was still not moving. David nodded and sat in the co-pilot. With one step on the accelerator, Sun Xiaomen's car headed towards David's house. David sat in the car without speaking, and the atmosphere in the car was a little awkward. David, do you really have a villa on the top of Pine Bay? After a while, Sun Xiaomeng broke the peace. Yeah. David just nodded slightly. You bought it yourself. Sun Xiaomeng looked at David in surprise. It was given by someone else. David said lightly. Seeing that David didn't seem to like talking to herself, Sun Xiaomeng closed her mouth. After a while, David broke the calm and said, at this time, what are you driving for if you don't go home for dinner? Xiwen has set up a restaurant to eat together, and discuss marriage by the way. Sun Xiaomeng said. You guys are getting married. David was slightly taken aback. Well, we've been talking for a long time anyway, and the parents are pressing hard, so let's get married, Sun Xiaomeng said. David was silent for a while, and then said, I advise you to think carefully, that Kui Ziwan is not suitable for you." David said this, not because Kui Ziwan often ridiculed him and David retaliated, but David asked Lin Tianhu to investigate Kui Ziwan secretly. This guy is a big radish, and he was in love with Sun Xiaomeng. I don't know how many women are mixed with it. Although Sun Xiaomeng is also a bit snobby, but after all, she is the daughter of her father's old comrade in arms. David doesn't want Sun Xiaomeng to jump into the fire pit. Sun Xiaomeng was not too surprised after hearing David's words, but explained with a faint smile, "Actually, Ziwan is not as bad as you think. He may be mean to you, but I will persuade him in the future of." Sun Xiaomeng misunderstood David. She thought that the reason why David said this was because Kui Ziwan often targeted David, and David hated Kui Ziwan in his heart, so he persuaded her like this. When David heard this, he could only smile slightly, not explaining anything. Soon, when the car was passing through a relatively dark road, a car suddenly blocked in front of David's car. Sun Xiaomeng was startled, and hurriedly stepped on the brakes, then stopped the car and almost hit it. "How did you drive? You're blind." Sun Xiaomeng rolled down the car window, stuck her head out and yelled loudly. But just after she scolded her, she shrank her head back in fright, because she saw that there was a Porsche 911 standing in front of her. She didn't dare to offend anyone who could drive such a car. She really scolded him. "In a hurry, I am afraid that I will not be able to eat and leave." At this time, two people got off the Porsche car, a man and a woman. These two people were Jordan and Delia. After getting out of the car, the two looked at David with a sneer, and did not intend to leave. Sun Xiaomeng felt terrified when she saw it. She opened the door and got out of the car, and hurriedly apologized, "Brother, I didn't mean it just now, please give up the car, or you should go first." Sun Xiaomeng said to Jordan lowly. Jordan glanced at Sun Xiaomeng, and found that Sun Xiaomeng was wearing a light pink dress and a ponytail, and she was a pretty young girl, so he took a second look, which made Delia beside her jealous. "If you don't get out, we're here to find David. If you don't want to die, just get out of here," Delia yelled at Sun Xiaomeng. As Delia's voice fell, there were several vans behind the Porsche. At this time, dozens of people came down, all with machetes and looking bad. Sun Xiaomeng was so frightened that her face became extremely pale, and she didn't know what to do for a while. "Xiaomeng, you can drive away first," David walked down from the co-pilot and said to Sun Xiaomeng, who was already scared and stupid. Sun Xiaomeng looked at David and wanted to say something, but when she saw the dozens of big men with machetes, she got in the car and left in a hurry. "David, you really have a hard time picking up girls. You were just dumped by that Sonia, and immediately found a rich little woman. Seeing that this woman is young, drives a BMW, and has a good family condition? Tell me who's from it? Girl." Jordan looked at David with a sneer and asked. "What? You want to change your taste too?" David raised his mouth, "But you really should change. You always eat leftovers, which doesn't match your identity as the eldest young master of the Xiao family." David's words made Jordan's face instantly turn hideous. In fact, Jordan has been brooding all the time. Although Delia tried his best to explain that when she was in love with David, she did nothing and was never slept by David at all, but Jordan still had a knot in her heart. If he hadn't really liked this Delia, he would have reached the point of talking about marriage. Jordan would have wanted Delia long ago. "David, you're fucking pissing and taking care of yourself. What kind of virtue are you? How could I sleep with you? Don't be a toad and want to eat swan meat. I'm fucking disgusted when I see you." Delia yelled at David angrily. David's words were obviously trying to provoke her relationship with Jordan. David, you don't have to stir up troubles here and talk so fast. I believe that Delia will not sleep with you. Besides, I think you are virtuous. I'm afraid you don't even have the ability to be a man. Otherwise, Sonia will you dumped? If you were very good in bed and devoured Sonia to the death, you wouldn't be at this level now. Jordan gritted his teeth, although he said he didn't care, but he had a grudge in his heart. I don't know which of us has the ability to be a man? Haven't you discovered it yourself during this time? David smiled coldly. On the day he was released from prison, David crippled Jordan's ability, so now Jordan is no longer a complete man. After David finished speaking, Jordan's face instantly turned red and white. During this period of time, he was recovering from his injury. Logically speaking, his arm was only broken, which did not affect his other aspects. However, Jordan wanted to make out with Delia several times, but every time he took off his clothes, Jordan didn't respond at all. Originally Jordan thought that his injury would affect his other abilities, but when David said this, Jordan's heart trembled. Brother Lay, don't listen to David's nonsense. I know best whether you have the ability or not. You are the best. Stop talking nonsense with him, just kill him and throw him into the river, Delia persuaded Jordan. Jordan nodded, and then said to David, David, today is your death day next year, you offended me, I want you to know what happened. After he finished speaking, Jordan waved his hand, give it to me, directly hack him to death, and then throw him into the river. Jordan gave an order, and dozens of people charged towards David with machetes. People from the Along gang. David looked at the dozens of people who rushed up, and asked with a sneer. Seeing David at this time, Jordan was still in the mood to laugh, and he couldn't help but get even more angry. David, even if you find it, it's useless, because you're going to die soon. These people are indeed from the Along gang, and they are all one by one. But it's all killing without blinking an eye. Do you think you still have a chance to survive today? Jordan's face was gloomy, with a vicious look in his eyes. I think I should still be alive today. David raised the corner of his mouth, then looked at the dozens of Along gang members and said, didn't Liao Fixiang inform you that you can't provoke me? David's words directly caused the dozens of members of the Along gang to stop in place, looking at David up and down. Boy, who are you? How do you know Brother Xiang's name? At this time, a middle-aged man in a long gown asked David. Obviously this middle-aged man is the head of the Along gang. Who am I? You don't have the right to know. Before you start, you'd better call Liao Fixiang, David said lightly. David, what are you pretending to be? Brother Xiang, you can see him if you want. Jordan took a step forward, don't be afraid of him, I understand this kid, he has no identity, he was just released from prison. It's just prisoners of labor reform. Brothers are hacking him to death now, whoever hacks him first, I will give 200,000, and the other hand will give 10,000. Jordan knows that people will lose their minds and work desperately as long as they have enough benefits. When these people heard that the one who hacked to death first could get an extra 200,000, they rushed towards David like crazy, all thinking of hacking the first knife. Although Jordan gave the Along gang a lot of money, it was extremely limited if it was really divided into their hands. David watched these people take the initiative to seek death, and suddenly sneered, then raised his hand and grabbed a machete. He didn't see how David did it at all. Directly jumped into 2 paragraphs. The members of the Red Dragon gang who rushed in first were dumbfounded, looking at the machete with only half left in his hand, his eyes were full of horror. The others were also stunned. They didn't expect that David could pick up the machete with his bare hands, and even jumped the machete into 2 pieces, but David's hand was not injured at all. How is that possible? Jordan's eyes widened when he saw this scene, full of disbelief. Just when everyone was stunned, David took a kick and directly kicked the member of the Red Dragon gang who was rushing in the first place. It flew out more than 10 meters, and then fell heavily in front of Jordan. The member of the Along gang vomited blood, and he didn't know if he could survive. Seeing the bloody scene in front of her, Jordan's face became very ugly, and Delia was so frightened that she hid behind Jordan. "Don't be stunned, let's go together, even if he can grab a white blade with his bare hands, so many people can chop him into meat sauce," Jordan roared loudly. The members of the Along gang reacted, raised their machetes, and rushed towards David again. David's figure flashed, and I saw an afterimage constantly wandering in the crowd. These were all members of the Along gang, and David didn't need to be merciful. In just 1 minute, these dozens of Along gang members. All the members fell at David's feet. The mourning sounded endlessly, one by one was covered in blood, either arms or legs were broken, and the whole person became a crippled person. David did not kill, but saved the lives of these Along gang people. Seeing the tragic situation in front of him, Jordan trembled, and Delia was so frightened that her face turned pale, and she didn't dare to look into David's eyes. "Just because of these people, you want to take revenge and kill me? Are you underestimating me too much?" David slowly walked towards Jordan. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.